Good evening and welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and tonight, oh boy, let me tell you, I say this a lot, a special treat for you all, but tonight I am absolutely ecstatic to talk to the individual who will be in the studio with me here. Folks, I have a CE5 counselor, spiritual advisor, and channeler of the Yahyel. Folks, I have Jonathan Trinity Martin joining us tonight, and I am, again, looking very much forward to this show. He is an interesting individual with so much to share. I couldn't be more grateful tonight to have him here. And once again, folks, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you for coming. I see most of you in the chat there, and I appreciate your attendance, and the numbers will climb as we go. All right, folks, so I'm going to read a little bit about Jonathan and what he does, and I'm going to get right into the interview as we do normally here on Dark Hour. We don't waste a moment. So Jonathan Trinity Martin is a channeler. Whether you wish to connect with your extraterrestrial counterpart, higher self, or spirit guides, Jonathan can channel them for you. His ability to tap into your consciousness and bring through your guides is an opportunity for you to access vital information about yourself. Whether you're looking for guidance on your spiritual path, healing, extraterrestrial communication, or simply wish to experience the high-frequency bliss energies, connecting with your guides is the perfect opportunity. You'll also learn to recognize the energy of your guides and ETs, counterparts, to enable you to connect with them more easily yourself in the future. Now, that last sentence, I just want to comment, is really significant because a lot of folks undergo certain training or they get involved in classes and other forms of guidance in the spiritual world. And a handful of times it'll just kind of remain there with that practice. They never really learn anything that they can take out and empower themselves on their own. And I feel that Jonathan does just that. He gives you that gift of self-empowerment with the information that he presents, and I think that you will find the same by the end of the broadcast. You can find Jonathan Trinity Martin at Starseed Training World. The link for that is contact.starseedtraining.world, and you can find that in the description below, along with his YouTube channel. Also, there's the link, but that is called Jonathan Trinity Martin, again, Starseed Training World. Please check out his videos. They're really inspirational. Really light, uplifting, nice vibration. This guy's got some great energy. And I'll be honest with you, my interaction in trying to get him on the show, I messed a lot of things up in terms of scheduling. So some of you who were here last week, sorry about that. Guess what? It was all my fault. I mean, I said that before, but it's definite. It was my fault. But I'm very happy to have him with me tonight. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Jonathan Trinity Martin. Jonathan, how are you this evening? Thank you for joining us here at Dark Hour Paranormal.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to the interview. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's get started here. We'll get into a nice conversation. So, I do have some questions for you. I generally try to mold my questions around information that's been produced by people who come on the show, and also instill my own curiosity and inquisitiveness into it. So without me keeping on and talking as I am, let me get to my first question here. Is there any discernible difference between channeling spiritual entities and extraterrestrials?
I guess the only difference is that the extraterrestrials that I channel are physical. They have physical bodies and they can appear in our reality in physical ships and with physical bodies. So I guess there is that difference, yes.
So when you're okay, so this is also, you're bringing up a very interesting point as well, and that is that people are not really sure, or there's a lot of speculation surrounding the idea that extraterrestrials are in fact interdimensional. And this is sort of, I think, what you're saying here. So there is a physical component to the extraterrestrials that you channel, and yet there's this spiritual one-mindedness, right?
Yes, they're very much connected to, like you say, this idea of oneness, the greater consciousness that we all are ultimately. perhaps we can touch on that a little more in the future, a bit later on. But they so sometimes I've heard them described as sort of quasi-physical or semi-physical. They certainly have the way their ships work is that they actually connected to their ships. Their minds are connected to their ships, and they can actually teleport between time, in and out of time, or in and out of dimensions, or in and out of different places in the universe. And this is why we sometimes see the UFOs suddenly appearing and disappearing in videos. And so the way they do this is because of their deep understanding of the nature of reality, how we all are connected and we're all one consciousness. Everything in reality from their perspective is different frequencies. So all we have to do to teleport is change our frequency to the frequency of the location we wish to be in. This is what they share with us, and then they can be there. And then they have this wired into their ships, which are, as I understand it, are actually conscious beings, their ships, and they're kind of a manifestation of their higher mind. And so what they do is, to teleport, they just somehow shift their consciousness to the vibration, kind of like a visualization of the location they wish to go to. And then by attuning the vibration of their body in the ship to the vibration of the location they wish to go to, they can instantly teleport to that location. So this suggests, that they have a kind of interdimensional spiritual nature to them. I guess they're kind of the bridge between physical reality and the world of spirits, where you can sort of do anything and go anywhere, I guess, in spirit to a certain degree. And so yeah, they're sort of halfway between. They're like,
in respect to how they're changing their vibration, I think that's really interesting that you're mentioning matching the vibration of the location that they're going to visit. That makes perfect sense to me in retrospect of what you're saying. But in terms of a mechanism of how some of the races are actually moving about the ethers and our physical universe, a lot of us are familiar with something called the Merkaba, which Drunvalo Melchizedek had introduced in his way back in the late 80s and into the 90s. Now, essentially, for those who aren't familiar with this, very simply, it is two tetrahedral shapes within your arc field that, through a certain meditation, again, I'm very much simplifying this, but through a certain meditation, you are able to get these spinning in contrasting fashions. And in doing that, what you're doing is alighting something that is very ancient that we once knew about, how to connect to source and derive energy and nourishment through prana. Okay, so we didn't necessarily need the sleep, and we didn't need the physical adaptation of energy for our bodies and so forth. We were literally connected through source. So bringing it back to the extraterrestrials, one of the things that you can do with this field is to actually travel from place to place, and you can do it physically. In your opinion, or in your knowledge and research and experience, are extraterrestrials using more of their organic energy to shift about the universe, or is there some sort of technological advancement that we're not familiar with?
Well, from what I understand, what you call organic energy, or like it's kind of it's this and that. It's both. It's kind of like I say, their ships are conscious. So I don't fully understand this. I'm still getting my head around this myself.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, but from what I understand is like their ships are conscious, and so they're working with their ships interface with consciousness, as I understand it. Their technology has reached a level where it's actually interfacing with the consciousness of the universe. So when the Yahyel or Bashar teach about following your highest excitement moment to moment, this is kind of us interfacing with the consciousness of the universe. We're plugging into the wisdom of the intelligent universe, and we intuitively know what the best action is to take in our life based on the entire wisdom of the whole universe. And so this is why it's so much more efficient than trying to follow our minds and our monkey mind. And so they're sort of reaching this point in their evolution where they are one with the universe, and the technologies they're building, I think they're kind of like perhaps biological in some form, some sort of consciousness in the ship somehow. So it's kind of like the technology has evolved to the point where it's becoming almost biological, or an artificial intelligence, perhaps.
Exactly what I have been thinking. But I wanted to ask you that question because it's interesting to look at from many different angles. But I do believe what you're saying is actually very accurate. I recently came across somebody who had reported an extraterrestrial abduction when they were very young, and well, the story itself was very fantastic, but one of the elements that kind of popped out in my head when he began to first initially tell me the story was that when he boarded the craft with several others that he was with, he would sit down in the control seat, and through tapping into the collective consciousness of the race that they were being abducted by, he automatically knew how to fly the craft and was actually allowed to do this. Have you heard of any experiences with such direct involvement with the technology from our end?
Yeah, well, I've kind of heard these stories, not a huge amount. I mean, that's a very interesting story that you tell, and it certainly makes a lot of sense from my perspective, because how you talk about he connected it into the collective consciousness of the extraterrestrial civilization, and then he intuitively knew how to operate the craft. You know, that synced up a lot with my experiences about how when you're in their consciousness, suddenly you seem to have like this expanded wisdom and an intelligence, and you feel like this almost like superhuman being. And then when you come back to Earth, it's a bit like, oh, back to reality.
Yes. Yes, I could absolutely understand that, and it sort of reminds me, and this is more of a juvenile parallel, but it reminds me of when people started working with psychedelic plants and so forth, and they found that it would bring them to a state where they felt like they knew everything, and perhaps they did have access to knowledge that you didn't normally have in your waking state. But the problem is that as long as they were in this state, they had all the answers. But as soon as they just, started coming back down and hit baseline, because their vibration was lowering at the same time, they were losing these bits of information. So it was hard to retain it. So it just made me think of that. Of course, what people ended up doing, as I've mentioned before, was starting the spiritual revolution that we know now. So we could find these levels of existence in different and more healthy ways rather than using the plants that are essentially just tools, but we can get to that later. So, okay, so you are a CE5 facilitator and counselor, I understand, and you've been working with CE5 for the better part of 4 or 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So CE5 is the extraterrestrial contact meditation protocol for actually going out into the field and doing meditations and zoning ships into our location. And so this was devised by Dr. Stephen Greer, and I should just say that I'm not affiliated with Dr. Greer in any way. He encourages people to go out and share this information, but he does say, just make sure you let them know you're not affiliated with me. So I'm not affiliated with Dr. Stephen Greer, but as far as I know, he encourages everyone to go out and spread this message and share the information. So yes, so this is how it all started for me. This is why I still feel, before I got into the channeling, before I started following Bashar and got deeply into the spiritual stuff, when I was in the conspiracy world realm, looking at all sorts of dark and scary stuff, I came across Dr. Stephen Greer's CE5 meditation protocols and started practicing them. I was very open-minded at the time. I'd been looking into a lot of conspiracies, and I was becoming very open-minded after researching like the alternate world. And so I thought I'll give it a go. And this was 2008, I think, the year before I had my big experience. And I just used to lie on my bed at my parents' house and do the meditations, because I wasn't much of a yogi sitting up. And so I remember I did them for 2, 3, 4 days, and I started having a lot of powerful visions and also it'd make me feel really good doing the meditation. It was really my first experience with meditation, and I found it was extremely relaxing, extremely joyful, extremely rejuvenating. So at one point I kind of forgot that I was actually trying to contact the ETs. I was going through the process of I'd initially like visualize, I think, the image of a grey ET, because that was the only ET I knew at the time. Then I'd visualize the image of a flying saucer, and then the image of sort of our solar system and our galaxy, and then our planet, and then where I lived on our planet in the UK, an image of the UK, then an image of like Lincolnshire on the coast where I live. Then I viewed an image of Lincolnshire Cathedral, and then the big trees behind my house. And this is the method. You visualize this with the intention of connecting to the ETs, and you put it out there. And the idea is that ETs in the area, or sort of zoning into the energy, or pick up on it and be able to pick up on these visualizations you're sending out of where you live, and they'll come in and they'll start showing their ships. And so I was doing this. However, I'd almost forgotten about trying to contact the ETs, because I was getting all these amazing visions of like these other worlds with like these monks in these cyan like blue robes.
Oh wow!
And these other worlds, like these planets with like these big where all the inhabitants lived in still buildings. There was just like this world, and it was all barren and rocky, but like almost like this ley line or along a meridian line all the way across. There's just this big row of huge, great crystal points, and there were all these families of these blue ETs living in these like these crystal temples, like in this very hostile, apparently looking world. And so, yes, So to me, this wasn't contact. Looking back, like, this is amazing. And even if I had these visions now, I'd be like, wow. But looking back then, I was kind of like, well, this is fun. It's interesting. You know what I mean? But I didn't really relate it to any reality. And looking back now, I'm sure I was connecting to some sort of dimension. But I carried on doing that because of all this fun I was having. But like, yeah, I was just enjoying it. And then after about a month of doing it, or a few weeks of doing it, over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, I had like 3 very bizarre UFO sightings over my parents' house. And so that's how it all started for me, with the CE5 contact meditation taught by Dr. Greer. So I feel I have to honor that. It's it created it all for me. So
that is absolutely fascinating to me, because CE5 is a really big thing right now, and it has been for some years, but it's been growing in energy and momentum as we move forward. Why do you think so many people have a difficult time accepting the contents of Dr. Greer's CE5? I understand it's cerebral. I understand there's a bit of spirituality that's in there, but there are so many folks out there who are saying this is a life-changing experience. If you stick with the meditation and you follow this particular path, this is where it'll eventually lead you. What are your thoughts on people having a difficult time, again, accepting the contents?
Well, I guess it's the nature of the human mind and the nature of the ego, and I don't necessarily use ego in the term of arrogance. I use it in the term of the identification with the physical mind, and being very focused in a one-pointed physical mind perspective. And so like the shift of consciousness we're going through at the moment is the focus from a very strong and intent focus upon physical experience and the physical mind and the thoughts and what's happening, to an expanded state of consciousness where we can kind of observe our thoughts and observe our beliefs and observe our reality, and come to a more rational assessment of it. But the thing is, when we're heavily still in the egoic perspective, the mind-based perspective, which is where humanity's been for many thousands of years, and where most people still are, and no judgment, this is just an evolution we're going through. But when we're very heavily identified with the physical mind, and like kind of the ego construct, the personality construct, it's like a belief is a belief. We actually believe our beliefs to be true. Like, so we have a thought. So if we've grown up in a society where we've been told that extraterrestrials do not exist, repeatedly, that then becomes a belief. And from a third density or a mind-based perspective, we believe our beliefs to be true. So if we
Mm-hmm.
have a belief that says extraterrestrials don't exist, and then someone comes up to us and says, I just met an extraterrestrial, we instantly, like, the belief, the way our minds are wired, it's literally the way that a belief is something that's actually wired into our mind through the neurons in our brain. It's kind of like a programming. So if someone comes
Mm-hmm.
up to us and we have a strong belief that says extraterrestrials don't exist, and someone comes up to us and said, I've just had a conversation with an extraterrestrial, you instantly, you can't believe that, because your belief says it doesn't. And a belief is a belief, from like a lower state of consciousness. Our beliefs, rule our world. And so it's not until we begin to awaken our higher consciousness and our higher chakras and perhaps the third eye, and begin to step into like a higher awareness, that we can begin to say, or maybe my belief isn't an ultimate reality, actually. So it's kind of all connected to this evolution of consciousness and the ability to take on new beliefs. And really the spiritual journey, as I'm seeing it, the more I evolve, the more I don't hold on to any belief rigidly. I can't anymore, because my beliefs are evolving all the time. And like
Mm-hmm.
every day, every week, I have different perspectives. And I see it as just a belief, and it's just an idea, and it's just a perspective. And from the infinite nature of reality, all beliefs are true, and all perspectives are valid, because in an infinite reality, how can we say that something is wrong? So this is what the spiritual journey is. It's realizing that we are infinite beings, and our beliefs create our reality, as Bashar says and the Yahyel say. Our beliefs create our reality. So a belief is not something that's set in stone, a law of the universe. A belief is a perspective, and all beliefs are true because our beliefs create our reality. So if someone's say perhaps suffers from a mental illness, and they spend their whole life believing that there's a fairy at the bottom of the garden, that's their reality experience. And if the only thing reality is experience, as ultimately all reality is just consciousness and energy, and kind of a dream, and an illusory reality, as they say in the East, all perspectives are real and all perspectives are true. So I'm not sure where I was going with this, but
No, that was really well said. I mean, in respect to belief, I mean, this is something that people think about a lot and try to intellectualize, where it sits in the nature of our experiences here in this reality. And I really think that you just explained that very well. You spoke about ego, okay? And I take it the way that you do, but a lot of people wonder, is ego a tool, or is it something that's more detrimental in our makeup? What's the purpose of that? And my question to you is, what would an ego imbalance with spirit look like in an individual?
Yeah, well, I would say the ego, as I understand it, is definitely a tool, and it's not in its so I knew this conversation was going to come up somehow, and I was trying to work it out, because it's a complicated thing to explain, because I can see it and like experience it, but to put it into
Mm-hmm.
words. So how I see it is, the ego isn't, we could say we have a negative and a positive ego, because what we are as in our truest nature is pure consciousness, as I understand it, awareness, like just the energy that is all of creation. We are the pure consciousness that created all of creation. We are all source in our ultimate nature, and this is what we start to realize as we go into meditation and our mind quiets down. So what was the question? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. The question was, what would ego look like balanced within an individual and spirit? Yes.
Yeah, so the non-egoic state is just a state of pure consciousness, kind of the idea of the Buddha meditating in the cave in a state of bliss or samadhi, or pure awareness. When we're in that state in meditation, when we're not identified with anything, it's kind of like the bigger picture. We're aware of the whole view when we're not focusing on one thing. But what happens is, like, we can go into meditation and we're in this state of bliss and relaxation. And I thought about this example earlier, and then like we're totally, you know, just one with the universe. We're having this amazing meditation experience, and that's our true nature. That's our true consciousness. And then all of a sudden, our girlfriend phones us up and says she doesn't want a relationship anymore. She's found a new boyfriend. Sorry.
No.
And all of a sudden, like it's this blissful state of awareness all of a sudden becomes focused upon your girlfriend and your circumstances and the future and what you're going to do in the future and like what your friend's going to think about you and how you're going to pay your bills. And this is the ego state. The ego state is us as a pure consciousness becoming focused on an experience in physical reality, and we need the ego. We need the ego construct, as Bashar says, to have a physical experience. Otherwise, we'd just be in this state of pure awareness all the time. But we need the ego construct, as I understand it, so we can have a physical experience. You know, so we can focus in on our reality and interact with our reality. And so,
go ahead.
So
sorry.
Just quickly. The idea is that we have our ego is a negative, is a necessary tool to interact with physical reality. Otherwise, we'd just be this like pure consciousness, and we wouldn't be able to focus in and like interact with it, as I understand it. So, but the idea is we can have the negative ego, which is what's traditionally known as the ego, and we can have like the positive ego. So the positive ego is when we're in alignment with higher. So basically, when we're acting on our highest excitement, moment to moment, as the Yahyel or Bashar put it, when we're in alignment, when we're in the flow state, when we're acting on a calling, like this call, for example, like this was very much aligned. It was very exciting for me. So it was clear this was part of my calling and my path, and I had to do it. So right now, I'm using my ego construct to communicate with you, to bring this infinite consciousness into words and to interact on the computer and put my earphones in and stuff. So this is kind of like the positive ego. It's using my higher consciousness to focus my higher consciousness into physical reality, so I can talk to you and interact with the computer and stuff. And this is my positive. This is my ego, my personality constructs, like interacting with you. But the idea of the negative ego is when we're out of alignment and we're basically living in fear. Basically, when we're in alignment, we're living in unconditional love. So when we're in unconditional love, we're able to follow our excitement moment to moment fearlessly, because there's zero fear in, like, unconditional love is the opposite polarity to fear. So when we're in pure unconditional love, there's no fear there. So we can just always act in our highest excitement, always be aligned, because there's nothing holding us back. And we're coming from this place of unconditional love that just wants to help and serve and have fun and have a joyful ride through this reality. But when we have fear in us, this is out of alignment. So the idea is that us as a being, we know we are infinite consciousness. We know we are ultimately immortal beings. And, and if someone chops our head off, it's ultimately no big deal. Do you know what I mean? Because maybe feel a little bit of pain for 30 seconds, and then we're free. We're in spirit and we go on to the next part of our journey. So any fear is out of alignment with our understanding of ourselves as, infinitely loving, awesome, powerful beings. So if we have a fear that comes up that says, oh, I can't go on the podcast because my mum will laugh at me, or something, this is just, it's it might be true that your mum might laugh at you, but it's not true that it's a problem. It's your mum laughs at you, so big deal. It's like, oh, mum, yeah, it's a bit crazy. So it's like, so it's like the negative ego is when we're operating from fear. And like selfishness, and all selfishness comes from fear, because if we knew we were creating our own reality and we were infinite consciousness, why would we need to be selfish?
Again, incredibly well said. And you know what? You answered the question I was going to ask you during a pause there, that I thought we were going a different direction. So that's perfect. I don't even have to revisit that. Oh, my God. That's awesome. Let's move on a little bit to your experiences with the Yahyel and whoever else that you are connected with. Something that people love to know or at least have, is a visual of some of these extraterrestrial races. And those is a very superficial point to touch on. I think it's important in certain respects for the comfortability of people, maybe. But what do the Yahyel look like to you? Are they a parent race to human beings? And have they divulged any details about their planet or environment in your interaction with them?
So no. To get to the first question, so they have actually. Yeah, I was gonna say no because I hear conflicting things about. I've heard other Yahyel channelers talk of the Yahyel having a planet. Yet whenever I've contacted into them, and from what I've heard from Bashar, they spend most of their times on these giant motherships. And so from my perspective, and perhaps I can, if the viewers want to check out my channel, I'll do some channelings coming up on how to, and I'll ask them this more specifically. But from what they whenever I sense into it or I communicate, they're always on ships. They seem to have. I'm getting this vision now. It's like this, the boomerang ship from the Phoenix Lights. I don't know if you're aware of the Phoenix Lights. Well, yep. Apparently that was the Yahyel, and so they have these huge, great, like mile long or 2-3 mile wide ships that are like motherships. And from what I see in the center of this, they kind of have like this biodome. It's kind of like the Eden Project or something. These big like tropical gardens, and like there's this big. So they've got like some green area, but it's all kind of like a synthetic, grown under a dome, and they've got this big pool and these big trees. And I see it now actually in like these balcony areas. It's kind of like have you ever been in like one of these like really luxury swimming pools in these amazing resorts, where they have these massive pool and all the palm trees around the outside and these big tiers with the bars and all this
I can picture that.
Yeah, this is what I see for kind of like the ship. And then they have like sleeping quarters, which are fairly like simple and contained, because I guess they have to like save space even in a 3-mile ship.
Sure. I mean, you're still bound to some physical constraints, I imagine, if there's an aspect of you that's physical. Sorry, go ahead.
So what was the other parts of the question?
Oh, yes, not a problem. My second part of that was, are they a parent race to human beings?
So this gets complicated again with the time and the future, and so it's an interesting question. So the Yahyel are actually a sister race to Bashar's. Some of you may know Bashar that's watching, to Bashar's civilization, the Sasani. And so the story goes that the classic grey ETs, the ETs that everyone knows with the big black eyes in all the films and the cartoons and that. These are actually very real ETs, and I think they first became quite well known from the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, which was many years ago and before they started appearing on TV, as I understand it. And so these ETs, as I understand it, are not actually extraterrestrials from another planet. They're actually from a parallel reality version of Earth. They're as I understand it, they're parallel reality Earth humans who went down a different. Sorry, did you?
No, shit. This is just resonating very, very heavily for me. Sorry, I'm reacting the way I am, but I'm listening to you. Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've got this from the channeling and from Bashar, but I've also gone and seen like abductees at conferences who know nothing about Bashar and all this, and then they sort of corroborate, the story. So it's very interesting. Yeah. So the idea is that this version of Earth, they became very technologically evolved. I'm not sure, but I think this is a future version of Earth. I thought this was from the same timeline as Earth, but now I'm feeling it's from a future version of Earth. So I'm not exactly sure, but basically it's from a parallel reality version of Earth, where we destroyed ourselves in this parallel. Basically, we became very technologically evolved and also very telepathically evolved, but we became very unemotional, and we had no heart. We bred out like our compassion and our heart and empathy, and became very intelligent and very technologically and very like connected to like perhaps masculine consciousness and this kind of intelligence. But the story goes that because of this lack of emotion in the civilization, it caused the race to mutate. They also had to go underground because they like kind of destroyed their planet, and this is why they got their big eyes. And at some point, they all mutated from going underground. They grew these big eyes, but then they could no longer reproduce. They couldn't produce progeny, children. So what they did was they, because they were so technologically advanced, they had this interdimensional capabilities. So they started exploring other dimensions, other timelines, other past and future realities, looking for genetic material to infuse with their civilization to prolong their civilization. And they found us, and we were kind of perfect for it because we kind of gone the opposite way. We kind of weren't very intelligent. We definitely weren't very telepathic, but we were very emotional, extremely emotional beings. And I'm sure all you viewers agree, we get a lot of emotions. And so this emotional trait was, as I understand, exactly what we were looking for, because the emotion was coming from our heart and our big compassion, but it was very messed up. But it was this emotion and our connectedness to compassion and love that was the trait they were looking for. So they apparently set up base in the Zeta Reticuli star system, which is the stars that were actually drawn out by Betty and Barney Hill after they were abducted, and then something like 10 or 20 years later proven to be a real star system. That's like scientific fact. You can look it up, I'm sure.
Wow.
So it's very, very interesting. Yeah, but they drew the star map of the Zeta Reticuli system before it was known about, I think. Don't hold me to it, but I'm sure that's correct.
Oh, we can look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And then they started coming to Earth, and the story goes they set up an allegiance with the government. There was, I can't remember which president it was. It's all on the internet if you want to do your research. They set up a pact, a treaty with the government, that they would give our governments some technologies. And there's all sorts of stories, things like fiber optics, the printed circuit boards, Velcro, believe it or
yeah,
not.
I heard that.
Yeah, from their suits, and all sorts of technologies for interface, like a lot of fighter jets these days are, I believe, using technology that interfaces with the human mind, so they can kind of look and work faster. And I believe this technology came from these interactions. And so apparently the Greys, they weren't very honest, and neither were we, and the treaty just went to pot. Both sides just didn't stick to the treaty at all. And the agreement was, though, that the Greys would be allowed to do the abductions without being bothered by like fighter jets and helicopters all the time, in exchange for the technology. And apparently the treaty didn't go very well, and they all fell out. But because like the Greys are like these parallel reality version Earth humans. They're not like negative, they're not evil. A lot of people might see in that, but they have this emotion bred out of them, and they were kind of like us at the time. You know what I mean? Humans haven't been the most honest for the last, and like certainly governments, sticking to treaties. They're kind of on a similar level to us. So, and anyway, so they came to extract our semen and eggs, to cut a long story short, and our genetic material to produce to hybridize us. And if we look at abduction stories, there's many stories of particularly women, but men as well, being taken, like having these horrific experiences where they've got all these probes going in them. The classic anal probe joke from Whitley Strieber's book. And it was brutal for them, because they were kind of treating us like animals, like we get dolphins and we'll pull a dolphin out the sea and stick a tag in its ear and chuck it back in, thinking we're being compassionate and loving, but it's kind of like that. So they're always bringing us back unhurt, but people were going through some very horrific experiences, having their, semen and eggs extracted consciously. And so yeah, but basically the project was to create this hybrid species. And we have these stories of people being abducted and being taken around grand rooms with all these cinders with like hybrid looking children being grown in them, and very scary stuff. And so but the idea is that the Yahyel that I channel and Bashar's civilization, the Sasani, are the progeny of this hybridization program. And they've actually come back from the future. Like, I think that the Yahyel, I'm connected to around 1,000 years, something like this. And Bashar talks about his civilization coming from around 3,000 years in the future. But it's all very complicated. But so this is who the Yahyel are. So it all gets very confusing with there being our children, but they're actually from the future. So are they our fathers or our children?
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I didn't mean to throw you off at all there, but I end up sometimes being very animated when I'm passionate about something and something resonates with me. But what you're telling me absolutely resonates with what I've known and understood extraterrestrials to be on a certain level. Yes, I do believe that there are some that are coming from other planets, but it's always been a speculative thought in my mind that they could be existing parallel to us in some way. Now, it's been suggested that perhaps these are specifically the Greys and subspecies that could be identified, along those lines, that there is a possibility that they might be us. But this isn't like the most prominent thought when people start talking about extraterrestrials, but it's always been there in the background, just peeking its head up every once in a while to remind people it's still there. And I feel like you're making that connection in talking the way that you are. So that is absolutely fascinating. Back to very quickly, because I like to touch on this once in a while. What are your thoughts on using psychotropic plants to communicate with extraterrestrial species? And I mean, specifically, there's been talk in the past of the magic mushroom or psilocybin having some sort of direct connection to extraterrestrial species. Are we tapping into maybe a dimensional energy there, or are we tapping into some sort of guardian of the plant that might have relationship to extraterrestrials? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's an interesting question while I'm here in Peru, in the land of the plant medicine.
Yep.
Because I've certainly been experimenting while I'm here. So can we talk about this on the podcast? I mean, what are the boundaries? I mean,
no, we don't have it.
Right, don't we?
Anything that would we're safe. I mean, I don't think so. We're not talking about killing kids or anything in descriptive detail. I think we're okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yes. Thank you, though.
Yeah. Well. So I have experimented with some while I've been here, and also as a silly child, but those are long days ago doing LSD in my teens.
Yeah, me too, buddy. Me too.
Yeah. So, and I think that it played a part in opening up my consciousness. But more recently, it's funny you asked that because right here, this place I'm staying now, they actually serve or make huachuma here, which is San Pedro, which is the plant medicine native to this land, which is a mescaline. It contains mescaline. And it's totally legal here. They sell it in the shops. You can buy chocolates with these mescaline containing San Pedro in the town, and it's quite funny because weed's illegal, and this is like way more powerful. But and of course they have ayahuasca here, which I haven't tried myself yet. It's like everyone's doing ayahuasca here, like this community here, and like everyone's doing ayahuasca. It's like the hippie thing, and it's kind of put me off a bit. I don't want to be just getting it. So but I've experimented with the San Pedro, and I also experimented with Changa, and perhaps Changa is the most relevant for this. And this is a sacred medicine from the Brazilian rainforest, and there they make it naturally. But I found out that what we're getting here is actually made with chemicals. It's not quite so great, but it's basically DMT. It's about 30 to 40% DMT, which is what Bashar kind of talks about a lot. Bashar recommends DMT for accessing interdimensional realms. So DMT is kind of like cutting straight to the chase. So DMT is actually a natural chemical that's released from our pineal gland, and our pineal gland is basically our third eye. So this access point to the other dimensions that's been talked about in many spiritual traditions, you know, Hinduism, I think Buddhism, certainly ancient Egypt. They've got, like, actually, if you see the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus in ancient Egypt, it's actually, if you get a pineal gland and the pituitary gland, I believe, and slice them in half, like, and look at them, they actually form the image of the eye of Ra. So the eye of Ra is actually a sliced in half pituitary gland.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And so this is the access. And so this, we can do meditations. We don't need to take the drugs. I certainly don't recommend it. I've had, they are dangerous. They certainly can be very dangerous, certainly psychologically and possibly physically. So you've got to really know what you're doing. And I had some crazy experiences, but it basically, you can release DMT naturally yourself through meditating and focusing on the pineal gland, the third eye. This naturally releases DMT, and this is what causes to have visions when we're in meditation and we have visions in meditation. It's because our pineal gland's been getting activated, and we're able to access the dimensions. There's I think there's a famous documentary on YouTube called DMT, the spirit molecule, and so this has been known about for many thousands of years on Earth. That the pineal gland is the access point to other dimensions. So basically, by smoking DMT, or I believe people even inject it if they're really crazy, but I tried smoking DMT once, and I smoked this changa recently, and it literally takes you into another dimension. If you have a strong dose, like the first time I had it, my friend had recently left Peru to go back to America, and a few days earlier, and a few minutes after I smoked the changa, I was sat in a room with this friend. I was just in another room. I was just like in a room in another dimension. And it was like, but it was so clear to me that it was actually real. It wasn't not real, because the way I saw it at that moment was just like, you know, like you are infinite consciousness in a form, and like me, I'm infinite consciousness in a form. This is how I see it. And so my friend is infinite consciousness in form, but infinite consciousness then molded itself in this vision, in this other dimension, into my friend again. But it was still like my friend, because it was the same consciousness. I couldn't say that it wasn't real. It was a real experience to me. And so yeah, and yeah, so particularly using things like DMT, things containing DMT that release this chemical in your brain. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, from my perspective, like what I teach in my ET contact training, check out the link below, guys, is that extraterrestrial contact is an expansion into a new dimension of consciousness. See, if you look at my YouTube channel, I'm half time talking about spirituality and half time talking about ET contact. And I'm always trying to tie it into one, just for marketing purposes. It's so complicated, it gets confusing, you know, for the business. And because it is kind of one thing, but obviously from a human perspective, they're kind of different. But how I see it is like, we're going through this evolution of consciousness, as I call it, from third density into fourth density, or we might call it into the fifth dimension, or the age of Aquarius, or the new age, but we're going through this evolution of consciousness. And what's occurring, personally, from my perspective, is that my consciousness is shifting to experience myself as kind of everything. Like, I realize that, like, my body and my mind and the outer reality, it's all one experience that I'm having as consciousness. And I don't really see it separate anymore. It's kind of like entering into a dream in a sense. But what's happening as I enter into this new state of consciousness, it's kind of like a new dimension. It is a new dimension of reality, because before we thought we were just the physical body and we had very limited experience. Our mind guided us and we did this and this and this according to our mind.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're literally experiencing reality as self being everything, as self being the infinite creator, like you being me, I being you, you guys all watching this, you're all me, I'm all you, we're all one entity. And so what's occurring, this is the new dimension of consciousness, the realization we're all one being. And as we shift into this consciousness, this new consciousness, it becomes very palpable, and you literally feel it directly that we're one, we're all one consciousness. And in this new dimension of reality, we're also seeing that there's a whole grander aspect to our being and consciousness in the universe that contains the ETs and the angels and the past and the future and and our soul and our higher self. And it all actually consists here and now in this dimension, in this new dimension. It's kind of always been here, but now we're experiencing it as this dimension. And in this new dimension of consciousness, we can literally just like sort of connect with the ETs, like in an aspect of our consciousness. It's more like the sky out there is like an aspect of our consciousness. It's almost like a database, like the internet. You know, it's like our consciousness is out there. Our infinite pure intelligence is expressed in the universe, and that is us. So it's almost like when we feel one with the universe, and we're like, okay, now I want to connect with the serious civilization, so I'm going to put my consciousness in this part of the universe and connect to this dimension of consciousness, which apparently is kind of out there, but really it's within me as a dimensional experience. And we're kind of like, and in space of consciousness, the ETs manifest within our consciousness as a new dimension of reality.
Holy shit. That is that is awesome. That is awesome. Again, it's the way you're explaining these concepts and the clarity that you're giving us. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, man. Moving on to again a little bit more with the extraterrestrials here. Here's another question that people have been asking a lot lately. Is there a connection between the paranormal or shadow people and extraterrestrials? And as sort of a follow-up with that, or in addition to it, what about cryptids? Is there any relationship between extraterrestrials, the paranormal, and cryptids?
I mean, I guess we could find sort of links, but I guess the connection really is, you know, kind of like I just said in the last question, what the connection is that we are evolving into this higher dimension of consciousness, and in this higher dimension of consciousness, there are not only more evolved beings of love and light, but there are actually more evolved beings who, like what we might term demons, who actually like feed off fear and war and manipulation and controlling people and all this sort of stuff. And as I understand it, you can actually evolve in consciousness up to a certain level along the dark path. Apparently at a certain level it kind of dissolves. It no longer makes sense because you reach a certain frequency and it just becomes obvious that we're all the one same being, so darkness no longer makes sense. But apparently until that point you can go very high up in consciousness, you know, and this is what's known as like fallen angels and demons. So like Bashar always says, enlightenment or expansion or ascension, it's about becoming more aware of the darkness. It's not about becoming less aware of the darkness and like hiding yourself in a hole and saying, oh, it's all love and light, everything's rosy petals.
Yes.
It's about becoming more aware of the darkness, because you can't become more aware of the light without becoming more aware of the dark. It's kind of a law of creation or something. You're rising in consciousness, and the more bliss you see, the more knowledge you have of the ecstasy and the bliss and the oneness and the love of the higher dimensions. It's kind of like the darkness comes up and says, well, hey, this isn't the only thing in reality. There's me as well, and I'm even more darker and I'm even more evil than before. And I'll fuck the language.
No, you can. It's fine. You're good.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
And so, but the secret is, when we're aware of the darkness and the light, we can make a choice. We can choose. We're not resisting the darkness. We're not fighting it, so trying to kill the darkness or get away with it. But when we accept it as part of us, and we accept that the bliss and the pain are valid aspects of the infinite creation, because us as infinity couldn't be infinite. We couldn't explore infinity, which is what we're doing basically as a consciousness, as a source consciousness. We're exploring infinity in every way infinity can explore infinity, because what else are we going to do as an infinite consciousness? And so yeah, I forgot where I was going. So where was I going with that?
I'm not sure, but I was on board. That's okay. It'll come back. We were, again, maybe it'll jog you. We were talking about the connection between extraterrestrials, paranormal, and
I remembered,
cryptids.
Yeah, it's so you said shadow people. I don't know what you talk. Perhaps you talk about the Men in Black or something like this, just as an example. Anyway, it's like, so say there are some Men in Black who are like really evil and they're trying to control the world. I don't know that's what the Men in Black are at all. It's a very mysterious thing. But say they are like dark people, shadow people. So this is the idea. We're becoming aware of these angelic beings. We're becoming aware of our own potential to match the frequency of the angelic beings and acting like love and service and compassion and joy and bliss every day. But at the same time, it's kind of like we have to become aware that there's also the other option, because it's a choice. We have free will. The gift that God, the creator, that we give ourselves, that creation has given us, is the gift of free will. And this is kind of the choice we're making as we go through this evolution of consciousness. The choice of humanity and the journey of humanity at the present is the choice to align to the dark or the light. And that's why it's becoming more polarized and more obvious now. And this is the evolution, because like in third density, in the old reality, it wasn't so clear, but now the frequencies are rising. It's becoming more obvious. Like if you get angry, it makes you feel terrible, and if you like feel blissful, you feel so blissful. It's like going into the dark energies. It can be so painful. It's because the frequencies are rising, and it's kind of polarizing it, and it's forcing us to choose. And so as we're having these experiences of angels and ETs and these blissful beings that saying you can operate in this ecstasy and love and service and compassion and love, and you can take this choice, it's like creation giving us our free will and saying you can do this, but you don't have to. You don't have to. It's your choice. You're the creator of your reality. It's your free will to experience anything you want. This is our gift to you. And so you can also do this. You can, and you become aware of, like how, I don't know, perhaps like, dark magic works, and how like warmongers are working with dark magic and all that stuff. So you become aware of the darkness. And but the secret is, as we become aware of it, if we can accept it and acknowledge it as part of ourself, and the shadow and the light, because we all know we've all had bad days, we've done bad things. So the darkness and the light exists within all of us, and the darkness and the light exists within all of creation. But the more we become aware of it, the more we have the opportunity to choose. Like when we weren't aware of it, kind of ignorance, we thought, oh, maybe I can, tell my wife she's a blah, 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 and it's fine. And like, because we were ignorant. But as we grow in consciousness, we can become aware that, when we call our wife something, it's actually causing her a lot of pain and like suffering, and it's actually kind of ruining a life. So we're becoming more conscious. We're becoming more aware of the darkness and the light. So we have that choice. We're now becoming more conscious. So we can say, well, I can make my wife's life hell if that's what enjoys it. Or I can choose to like try and calm down and have more compassion, because now I've got this higher consciousness. So yeah, it's kind of like as we're evolving in consciousness, we're becoming more aware of the light, but we're also becoming more aware of the dark. So we're more able to make the choice we wish.
I think what you just said is incredibly important, because a lot of people, like you mentioned, would rather sit on the side of light. And when people, at least what I've noticed, is when they first start getting into spirituality and exploring some of those avenues, their thought is that in doing so, they will only be that love, light, and happiness and so forth, the way that, you said it. It's so important to acknowledge that other side. We do exist in a duality. The very nature of our existence is polarized, and, you can't have the yin without the yang. It just doesn't complete the circle. But, you know, we can talk about this in a figurative sense, but to make it more literal, I understand is much more difficult for people, you know, going through their day and, you know, controlling their emotions and everything else they're going into. But to have this knowledge, and when something in the way of darkness arises, you can recognize it in a different way, that not necessarily are you taking up sword and arms and you have to go to battle here. This is an aspect of yourself for you to write and put proper in its place in terms of your awareness and what you understand about the entirety of, you know, yourself. Again, that's just, again, really, really well said. In respect to extraterrestrials, here, with the excuse me, with the multitude of stories and legends that you know, assert extraterrestrials came to ancient civilizations and extended esoteric knowledge, tools, scholastics, why don't we see them intervening in our present cultures? You know, there's so many stories that, you know, these distant tribes or these indigenous tribes had direct contact, and they were just handed information. I don't want to get off on the question I asked, but I'll follow up with that later. So again, why don't we have these extraterrestrials coming and intervening in the same way that is recorded in certain instances in the past?
Yeah, interesting question. Just quickly, if I could just touch on the last question just briefly. I just wanted to point out, like when we talk about like accepting the shadow and like this kind of thing, a lot of people, like I've noticed on the spiritual journey, can sometimes interpret that as, oh, my life's going to be hell forever then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not the case. I assure you, like this gets better. Like the challenges don't go away. Like the challenges kind of accelerate, and like what we previously determined as like something negative, you know, these situations come around in a way more and more. But what we start to realize is that we don't have to be affected by these situations. The choice to go into suffering as a result of a situation is a choice, and I guess it's just a process. And like over time, the more we become aware of the dark and the more we accept the dark and stop fighting, because the issue is when we're trying to fight our pain and get rid of our pain and get rid of our suffering and get rid of this and get rid of that, it's all just adding more and more negative energy to it, and that's where everyone's going wrong. But the idea is when you start to accept it, accept the darkness and accept the light, and just observe it as experiences in your reality, you start to notice that it doesn't actually necessarily have to affect you. Because like one day, like something that drove you crazy, the next day you're observing it, and for some reason you actually feel fine. And like so it kind of untangles it, and you start realize that like you don't have to get involved in all these dark energies, and it gets more and more exciting and more joyful and very challenging. But it's not a hopeless story, this enlightenment path, because sometimes in like some spiritual like teachings like non-duality, it kind of comes across as hopeless and people get very disoriented. But like I assure you, stick with this path, it's worth it. So but getting back to the other question you were asking about, how we've had extraterrestrial interaction in the past seems to record in our history, but we don't seem to be getting it now. Is that what you're asking?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, as I understand it, life is cyclical in nature. We're going through many cycles, and there's one well-known cycle called the cycle of the equinoxes. Mm-hmm. I might not get the facts exactly right, but this is generally right. So the cycle of the equinoxes is something like every 26,000 years, something to do with the wobble of the earth, the tilt on the axis or something. We move into a new area of the zodiac. The same way, like every month you go through a new zodiac sign. Every 26,000 years, like the galaxy, we move into a new section of the galaxy when we're in a new zodiac sign. So apparently we've been in the age of Pisces for the last 2,400 years or something. Mm-hmm. And it changes we go through all 12 signs every 26,000 years, and this is an astrological thing. And apparently this is and we're now going into the sign of Aquarius, and this is why this is sometimes called the age of Aquarius, or you know, the new age. And so, but this is a 26,000 year cycle. And so the story goes that kind of like 26,000 years ago, because we're at the beginning of a cycle now. We're now at the beginning of a whole new 26,000 year cycle, as I understand it. So 26,000 years ago, we were at the beginning of another cycle. And over 13,000 years, we went through 13,000 years of spiritual evolution to the top of the cycle, which was Atlantis. It was the civilization of Atlantis 13,000 years ago. What happens in a cyclical reality, as you go through an upswing into the peak of civilization, you then go through a natural devolution, a downswing. And this is kind of like we're saying, the natural negative and positive. This is how reality learns, by experiencing the growth and then experiencing the destruction. So something new can be born. And like death and impermanence, like talking about like the negative and the positive and how we view it. Like in human reality, we view like, well, if we lose our house, we lose our money, our car, our clothes run out, a family member passes on, we always view this as negative. But this is kind of ridiculous. Well, it is ridiculous, because change, as they say in Buddhism, like the idea of impermanence, change is fundamental to the nature of reality. Everything changes, nothing lasts forever. So everything is always changing. So I've lost my place again. Sorry.
All right, man. It's quite all right.
So what was I talking about? What was the question again?
Sorry, I was just pulling that back up. So we were talking about why the extraterrestrials would intervene in our history, and yet we don't see the same intervention. Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, I got kind of sidetracked because the idea is that this is the nature of reality. Something gets birthed, and then it has to die, so we can experience something. Because if things didn't die, we'd just be in the static reality like this. All the time, so this is the nature of the things are always dying, and so this is the cyclical nature of reality. And so the story goes that 13,000 years ago, Atlantis was at its peak. There were these pure spiritual beings who were 100% devoted to service to humanity and the highest of all. But then we got into the devolutionary period where the energies begin to change, and I guess it began to come back more towards identification with the physical world and the ego and the personality construct, and away from the identification with spirit and pure consciousness. And so what happened, as I understand it, like some high up priestesses in Atlantis suddenly realized how much power they had, and realized they could manifest a whole palace for themselves or whatever, or control an army of 10,000 people or something through their power, and began to get shift to the darkness, shift to the dark side, selfishness, the negative ego, and it began to go chaotic. And because of the shift into the dark energies, and these dark energies rising, it caused a meteor strike, or a series of meteor strikes that created a tsunami which sank Atlantis. And so the idea is that consciousness is now in this devolution. And so 12,000, 13,000 years ago, we were in this super high frequency state of high frequency consciousness and interdimensional knowledge and being, where ETs would like come and go every day, as I understand it. In Atlantis, we were literally, like trading and like communicating in and out with, with all these extraterrestrial civilizations. But then after the fall of Atlantis, they all like withdrew, and like everything went into like kind of a devolution. And like so I guess picking up history from where we next really know it, you're looking at kind of Babylon, ancient Egypt, and of course we get all the stories of extraterrestrial contact in ancient Egypt. I believe these beings like Ra, Thoth, Osiris. I think Osiris is one of the Anunnaki. And so we have all these stories of extraterrestrial, and Isis. I believe Isis was an extraterrestrial, perhaps from Sirius, and all these cat beings. So perhaps Sirius or Lyra as well. So we have all these stories of extraterrestrial contact in that time. So the idea is that we're going through this devolution, but kind of 4,000 years ago, it's still in quite a high consciousness. They've still got all the knowledge of Atlantis, and we see this on all the hieroglyphs and the high magical practice and all these temples. It's all that's the wisdom that filtered down from Atlantis. So they still have the knowledge of their connection to source, but after Egypt, like we went into this serious evolution. Basically, from there on, the Egyptians just got war crazy. You know, all the spirituality went out of it. All their higher consciousness went into like conquering the neighbors. And you know, and from there we go into like the Romans, and like, you know, we just went war and downhill, and like basically from there, that's because we've gone through this devolution of consciousness. We're coming right to the bottom of the 13, and that's why we're right at the bottom of it. And this is why, like 2000, we had like 9/11 and all these like completely horrific things, and like World War II, just like 100 years. I mean, it doesn't get darker than World War II, really, does it?
God, yeah.
So
yeah.
So this is the idea, and yet we come to like our consciousness dropped over the last 13,000 years ago. So 13,000 years ago and 4,000 years ago in Egypt, and like 4,000 years ago in like around here, Mesoamerica, and all, you know, like Quetzalcoatl and all the shamanic gods and all that, where we're having contact here as well. It's we were still in a higher consciousness 4,000 years ago, but over that 4,000 years since, we've gone through a real drop to the point where, like, you know, 100 years ago, 200 years, we were probably at like really the pit, you know, World War II and that World War I. And so, like, we were really unconscious then, and really low vibration, really unaware of our higher consciousness, because we need to kind of have access to our higher consciousness to interact with these interdimensional beings. And so I think this is the case. You know, we've dropped in consciousness, but the good news is we're now, since December the 21st, 2012, as I understand it, we're now back on an upswing and beginning a new cycle. So.
That's what I understand as well. In fact, the process that you just described, I'm familiar with as known as the Yuga cycle. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but that it's 26,000 years, and they talk about at the very bottom of that hour, so to speak, you're looking at the dark ages, or you're losing all sorts of consciousness in the way of expression and, again, connectivity. So that's. You brought up the story of Atlantis, which I wish we would have time to get into right now, man. It's one of my favorite things to really talk about. Maybe I'll talk to you after the show. We could get you back on at some point to kind of discuss the lore of that. But it's fascinating, and I think you really hit the nail on the head. You know, nothing can happen in the way of manifestation if the vibrations aren't within the same. They don't hold the same parameters. That it's going to be harder to connect or even manifest anything in that way. I mean, I'll give you an example, guys. Maybe you meet somebody, and, you know, right off the bat, there's something about them that kind of puts you off. It's not anything that they did. It's just a feeling. You know, I'm going sort of towards the negative respect, but this could also be something that happens in a more positive way too. Like you meet that woman that really, you know, sparks your interest and makes you feel alive. And it's a vibration, you know, you're matching vibrations. You're within that same set of vibrations to, you know, kind of connect that way. So thank you for, again, you know, going into detail with that. Let's see here. I have a couple more questions that I think we have time for tonight. I mean, believe me, I have many more, but that'll be up to you if you want to get back on. But, you know, we talk about the Christ consciousness grid that's around the earth. And this is something that apparently was in construction for quite some time at the latter of the last century. Did ETs have any hand in the construction of the Christ consciousness grid around the earth that was supposedly done? I think it was 1997, or was this something within the higher realms of maybe the angelic realms that were really putting this together? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can share my perspective of the Christ consciousness. So I remember Bashar saying many years ago when I first got into him, like, you know, people were talking a lot of these old stories, like the second coming of Christ, and people were asking, like, Bashar, what is the second coming of Christ? And Bashar was saying, like, how, like, the Christ is a consciousness. The Christ consciousness is like our awakened state. So, like, when Jesus became Jesus Christ, he awoke to his true nature as oneness, as source consciousness. And when Buddha awakened to the Buddha nature, he awoken to his true nature as source consciousness. And we also have the Krishna spirit. You know, when Krishna awoken to his Krishna spirit, he awoken to his true nature as source consciousness, as oneness. And so if we look at it, if Christ awakening to his true nature, you know, if the Christ consciousness is like oneness, and basically they're all the same thing, that they're pointing us back to our true nature as source consciousness, as pure awareness, as oneness, as infinite intelligence of creation. And so like, I keep losing myself, but I think I'm on track. So basically it's the same thing. The Christ consciousness and like the Buddha nature and the Krishna spirit, they're all pointing us back to our true nature as source consciousness. And so we can see how they're all the same thing. So as Jesus awoke to his Christ nature, as to his true nature, he realized himself as source consciousness, as the one infinite creator. And as Buddha awoke to his true nature, to the Buddha nature, he awoke to himself as oneness, as source consciousness. And as I awaken to my true nature, I awaken to my true nature as source consciousness, as one consciousness. So like it's all pointing to the same thing. So, but how I sense it is because Christ consciousness and Buddha nature, while they are the same thing, because they are both our source consciousness, but we like your true nature is Buddha nature, your true nature is Christ consciousness, my true nature, it's our true nature as infinite intelligence, as source consciousness, you know, beyond our minds, like what we access in meditation. And so, however, as I sense it, like, because Christ brought this message of, you know, the idea of oneness, as he said, I and my Father are one, the idea that we are one consciousness. As Christ brought this message of the Christ consciousness, of this higher consciousness, of, you know, the kingdom of heaven within, you know, another name for it. Like, Christ had his own specific like flavors. Like, Christ was known for having extreme compassion and love, and perhaps suffering quite a lot, you know, he devoting his life to service, and, you know, perhaps not, whereas like the Buddha was more known for, you know, spending more time in a state of bliss, you know, and transcendent unity consciousness, in a very grounded sort of centered presence. So while they're both pointing us to this one infinite intelligence that wants to be compassionate, that wants to serve, that wants to stay present and centered in the love and bliss of the present moment, like the Buddha nature has kind of, to me, this essence of a groundedness and a more meditative consciousness, whereas the Christ consciousness has this more idea of overwhelming love and compassion and just loving everyone so much that you just want to help them. And so really, when we say the Christ consciousness, I think we're really pointing to this expanded consciousness that we're all awakening to. And the second coming of Christ is this Christ consciousness, this source consciousness that we all are birthing through us all. The second coming of Christ is all awakening to Christ consciousness. And so I feel like what you're talking about with this grid of Christ consciousness forming around the earth, and are the ETs involved, as like grounding and like bringing source awareness into back this dimension. I think the ETs are very much involved, but like, perhaps if we're talking about specifically Christ consciousness, you know, we could say that, you know, only Jesus Christ is responsible for bringing that, because Christ consciousness is like Christ's flavor of infinite source self, if that makes sense.
Yes, actually it does. It really does. And I think that's an interesting distinction you make between Christ consciousness and perhaps, you know, what Buddhism is about, and that energy that's entwined with that. You know, many different paths lead to a similar place. While it may not be exactly the same place initially, I think, you know, again, we all are going back to a oneness in the same source. You know, something very simple I like to use as example is you have an apple. If you cut a slice off that apple and you set it back so it's separate, it's still an apple. And I think it's really that simple, honestly, at its core. So I'm going to ask you one more question here, and then we'll wrap up for the evening. But I'm not sure if you're familiar. Well, actually, I don't think you will be, because of what you mentioned in respect to kind of really honing in onto your own, paradigm and what you're doing, which I respect entirely and know exactly why you're doing that. But recently there was an individual named General Ashed of the Israel military recently divulging, among other things, that we were attempting to reach a galactic federation. What are your thoughts about that endeavor at this point in time? And is the Galactic Federation a physical entity, or is it more etheric?
Well, again, it's like Bashar says, it's this and that, not this or that.
Okay,
like
yeah,
the human, yeah, like the human mind, like we were talking about the ego construct and how it gets focused on a perspective. It labels everything as right or wrong. This, or is it this or that? It can't. And like, it's funny how you awake, you see, like, both things can be true. And so you were saying, is it like a physical thing or a more etheric? So through the ET civilizations, as I understand it, there's many dimensions or densities, as I sometimes call it, of reality. And in like the dimensions just above us, the ETs are physical, and we have like the Yahyel, the Sasani, and I'm not entirely sure which ones are totally physical. I think a lot of them are more non-physical. I think non-physicality is a lot more common in the universe than physicality. So I think a lot of the ETs involved with us are non-physical. However, I do feel a lot of them are physical, and especially the ones that are going to be more involved with us perhaps first. And so I think there's very much an alliance, and I get these communications a lot, because the idea is that as we grow in consciousness, and this is how I experience it from communicating with them, as we grow in consciousness and frequency, like I say, it becomes more evident and more vivid and palpable that we're actually the same consciousness, we're actually the same being. And so the more we grow in this state of oneness, the more we come to have common goals. Like the more it becomes clear that we want to help people and we want to help evolving civilizations. And like so all the ETs that are here to help us, they're going to have a very similar goal. Their goal is going to be to help us evolve in consciousness, to help us stay physically fit and healthy, to help us get through our emotional blockages, to help us, rewire our brains to embrace this new paradigm, to help us understand the higher dimensions and the mechanics of creation, how we can more effectively affect our reality by being of service and following our passion. So these beings have a more clear understanding of reality and a more focused goal. So I guess from this perspective, it's kind of a natural cohesion to begin to work together. As so yes, they do have an alliance, and from our perspective, they probably have like their officers and their different roles and all this sort of stuff. But I think from a higher perspective, it's kind of like consciousness merging together, and the alliance, or the federation, as we call it, is like a new, like the evolution of a new consciousness, like many consciousnesses coming together to form a new perspective, because they all have one goal. Like in the law of one material, channeled by Ra, Ra talks about the idea of social memory complex, the idea that of a collective consciousness, like an ET civilization, is one consciousness, like a billion beings all operating as one consciousness. He says the secret to evolving into a social memory complex, or a collective consciousness, which is where we're going as a civilization, is to have one goal. As the civilization becomes focused to one goal, it naturally connects telepathically and starts to become a social memory complex. So as we more and more focus on like creating a love-like reality, creating this new golden age that is focused upon creating wealth for all, and food for all, and shelter for all, and working towards this one goal of this love-like reality, Whereas at the minute, everyone's all polarized. You know, some people are being selfish, some people are being pure evil, some people are, you know, kind of half in, and some people are all in, and some people are disagreeing with other aspects of the spiritual community. But what's happening is we're coming to understand that, you know, it's all about getting aligned. It's all about going with the flow, and this is the most effective way to be of service and like operate from this place of flow and compassion and service. And as a civilization, we'll come to this understanding that this is the goal, to move to a love-like reality of service to all. We will begin to operate as a telepathic civilization, like a social memory complex, as Ra calls it.
Again, fantastically described and expressed. You raised really interesting points, and again, it all really comes back to vibration and us being ready, not only as individuals and the things that we need to clear out in terms of old patterns and energetic blockages that we may have, emotional or otherwise. It's definitely a focus on the collective as well, and what we can do for each other is usually very synergistic if we allow the course of things, I think, to happen naturally. But Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for coming on with me tonight. I have had a fantastic time with you, and I really appreciate all of your insight and experiences. And I can tell there's a lot, you know, when we sit and we talk sometimes, you know, we start with an initial thought or an answer to a question or a question itself. And then as soon as we get into it, we begin channeling ourselves. So we're actually, you know, funneling different ideas in from spirit sometimes. And, you know, we end up bringing other things up in the conversation that, again, initially weren't necessarily there in our conscious mind. And I love that sort of conversation. And I don't mind that we lose each other once in a while through it, because I do the exact same thing. A lot of times when I'm doing this, I'm actually sitting in your chair, going through the same things. But it's just a matter of having so much information come in at once and trying to express it all as not necessarily as quickly as possible, but as thoroughly as you can. It just, you know, we kind of get caught in the ethers there, so to speak, but it's an okay thing. And again, thank you so much. So what I'll do here, just to let people know, once again, to reiterate, you can find Jonathan Trinity Martin on YouTube by that name, Jonathan Trinity Martin, Starseed Training World, or you can visit him and see what he does and check out some of his services and how they might benefit you, because believe me, this man is onto something, and through this conversation, I hope you realize the same. Check him out at contact.starseedtraining.world. Both of these links, once again, folks, are right in the description. Go and check him out. Support and like his channel. He's growing as well, but his message is fantastic, and I fully support it and get right behind it. But again, thank you so much, Jonathan. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. It's I've really enjoyed it. We've gone really deep into some interesting topics, so it's been great to cover some deep rabbit hole stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'll do now is I'll take you off the air if you'd like. I'm going to stick. Excuse me. Let me start that again. See, here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you off the air. If you wouldn't mind sticking around for just a moment, I'd say my proper goodbyes off camera. I'm just going to throw out the intro, and I'll be back there. If you have to go, I totally understand, and that's fine too. Excellent. Thank you very much.
I'll see you in a minute. Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. Really enjoy it. See you in another present moment. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you. Well, folks, man, yeah, we really did go deep tonight, didn't we? And I know that we could have kept going. To me, this time that we spend together, it flies by so quickly. I know there's a lot of cliche in that, but my God, you know, when you sit in this space, you know, and I get a chance to interview people like Jonathan, I know you guys are seeing the visceral aspect. You're hearing the audio that's going through your speakers in way of conversation, but you're not necessarily feeling what it feels like to be in this room, connecting with that energy. You know, there's a huge vibrational how do I say it? It's a shifting upwards when I speak to people like Jonathan, that literally I feel like I'm in a different space altogether energetically, where time doesn't really have the same relevance, and, you know, thoughts flow very easily and there's an understanding between people in terms of what's being expressed. And again, as I'm gushing on here, it's well deserved in respect to Jonathan. And again, I thank you for coming on the show, folks. Next week I will be back. I'm not going to announce exactly who we have yet because I have a couple things pending, which I'll find over the next couple days. But please keep it on your radar. You will not be disappointed, as I'm sure you guys had a fantastic time tonight looking at the chat room and some of your responses throughout the broadcast. Very quickly, I want to let you guys know, excuse me, I am part of Third Phase of Moon's team, and I work with Third Phase along with Richie G of Goofon. And we've been doing some fantastic stuff with analysis through different videos and pictures. We have different stories, documentaries that have been released by Third Phase of Moon, which Rich and I sit down and go into at great length. And it's been a fantastic journey so far. And I'm, again, honored to be part of the team. Thank you very much, Third Phase of Moon. And thank you very much, Goofon. Richie G over there. He'll be on in about a half an hour. Please check him out as well. I do have a little surprise coming up for you guys. I'm going to save it for the next broadcast, but keep your ears open. I have a little something in the way of working with Third Phase of Moon, Dr. J, Radio, Live, and Goofon that I will be showing you, and that will be on the next broadcast. So until then, folks, have a wonderful rest of your night. Stay inquisitive, stay curious. I mean the same thing, don't they? And stay magical. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, guys. We'll see you next time on Dark Hour Paranormal. Good night.